And here we go. We have liftoff.
Propulsion continues to be nominal.
R68 chamber pressure looks good.
Following up. Roger, Atlantic.
Water towers fly! Yes!
Tango down to nominal.
Flight downside FD off. Bring in FD off. Off. It's orange!
Oh my god! Oh my god!
Decollage. Put that in the big bag,
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
The methane will be igniting in the flare, correct?
Yikes. You dead? Sure. We don't need any more of these.
Good evening. You are taking a live look right now at Space Launch Complex 40 underneath the gray skies here at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida, where a Falcon 9, after at least a day delay, is now set to try and launch the Starlink 10-2 mission. I see all the 5x5s in chats, meaning that you can hear me. And for those who don't know who me is, I am Sawyer Rosenstein, and I will be your host for this launch attempt. The current T0, after a few delays, is 8:14 p.m. Eastern Daylight Saving Time, so just under 58 minutes from now. And of course, I am not alone. Joining me on commentary here, as one of my co-commentators, is Trevor Sesnick. Trevor, how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing good. As you've mentioned, we've seen a lot of weather delays today and yesterday, but let's hope that SpaceX is able to find a gap in those clouds and get this sucker off the ground.
All you need is that one gap and that one little second of T0 there. You never know. And I know someone that can definitely attest to the craziness that is Florida weather because she is currently out in the field and providing commentary for us today. Julia Bergeron. How's it going, Julia?
Good evening, Sawyer. It is going well. It's still a bit humid, a lot buggy. Sun's starting to dip behind some clouds, but you know what? It's not raining, and there are no thick clouds to break that rule. So I think we're good to go for lunch tonight.
That is what we're hoping for. As of right now, the KSC weather channel they provide is showing a green board, which is what we want, saying that there's no current weather issues, as opposed to the original T0 when we were dealing with a Phase 2 lightning warning, which is the most severe weather warning that they issue at Kennedy Space Center, Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, Patrick Space Force Base, etc. So it's taken a while to get here, but Trevor, do you mind giving us a bit of a rundown of what the 10-2 mission is?
Yeah, of course. So this is the second Group 10 mission for SpaceX, which is kind of hard to believe we're already on Group 10, but SpaceX just doesn't stop launching these. So this will be taking 22 satellites into low Earth orbit. So you mentioned earlier, liftoff is in about 55 minutes, and it will be B1073. That booster will then be recovered on Just Read the Instructions about 630-ish kilometers downrange. Both of the fairing halves on today's mission will be recovered by Doug. So there's not a whole lot special on today's mission, just kind of another Starlink mission. However, it will be the quickest turnaround of B1073, and already SpaceX's 63rd launch of 2024. So it's just kind of crazy the pace that we're seeing.
That is a crazy pace. Also crazy is that I forgot to mention our operator, Carson. You saw his card there for just a moment. Carson will be operating and pushing the buttons, pulling the levers and all for this stream. So thank you, Carson. And now we talked about, like you said, that we've got all the assets downrange. But for this particular booster, Julia, do you mind filling us in on its flight history?
I certainly can do that. So, B 1073 started its career May 14th, 2022. And so we're looking at about a 2-year-old booster. And ironically, that was with a Starlink. And normally we don't seem to start out booster careers with Starlinks lately, but there we are. Uh, SES 22, Hakuto R, Amazonas Nexus, CRS 27 are kind of the highlights of that. And then overall, 16 Starlinks under the belt for this booster, bringing it to flight 16 tonight. And as we talked about, just read the instructions is downrange. And this is a northeasterly launch. So downrange is actually to the north of us, and our friends should have a good view as it goes northeast tonight.
Little robot-y there at the end, but yes, we definitely heard going northeast tonight and all of that history there for this particular flight. I gotta say, the view right now with the clouds and everything, it's as ominous as it's been, it's quite gorgeous. I do need to shout out our field team out there with the cameras. We've got Mr. Max Evans with one camera for you, and then we have the fantastic DYs as well, also providing a view. Hey, there you go, flipping between the two of them. So I can't forget Max and I can't forget D. So thank you to both of them for rolling out and sticking out the Phase 2 lightning warnings to get to this point where we are.
And it's worth
Alright.
highlighting just how bad, I mean, I'm not the one who lives in Florida, but just how bad the weather has been the last few days. Yesterday, SpaceX was given a 5% chance of being go for launch, so they didn't even bother going for that launch window. And then today, they're at 25%. So hopefully they can find a window, but Florida weather has not been the greatest the last 2 days.
Yeah, that I think is an absolute understatement. Let me check here. I mean, according to the Spaceport Weather Archive, it appears to be broken at the moment. But I mean, down where I am, which is a little further south, we've had points of 7 to 10 inches of rain per day. So it has been quite wet throughout a large portion of Florida, although the worst of it has been further south from the Cape. You could see there, that was the forecast for today with the 25%, the primary concerns, the Anvil Cloud Rule, Cumulus Cloud Rule, and Surface Electric Field Rules. Basically, thunderstorms that could create lightning that could cause problems with onboard electronics. If they have to go to tomorrow, since if they need to delay, they only have 16 minutes to play with at the end of the window, then it would go to tomorrow, where it begins at 40% go and ends at 80%. And I think the other important thing to note, booster recovery weather is low, despite the fact the current Invest 90L down here is on its way towards the northeast. So for now, at least that's good. Let's answer some of your questions. Reminder at NASASpaceflight if you have any of them. Julia, this one's a good question, I think, for you. Timothy Jones asked, over here from the UK, stopping at Cocoa Beach, would staying here or going to Titusville/Daytona Beach area be better?
Oh, well, in all honesty, you don't have a bad view from Cocoa Beach. Titusville, you'll get a little bit more of a view because in this case we are going northeast, but honestly, you can stay where you are, avoid traffic, and enjoy the view from the ocean, to be honest.
I mean, yeah, Cocoa Beach, the areas around places like Sherry Down Park, basically anything south of the port itself is usually a really good spot. You may not hear it as loud, but you will certainly be able to see it as, again, as someone who lives 150 miles south, I'm still able to see it here. But being that close, I would definitely say it's safe to assume you will get a good view, weather pending. Here's one from Archie Rush, and I'll put this to you, Trevor. They're asking, how many Starlink shells will there be in the end, or do we even know?
Yeah, I sadly don't think we have a great idea. So this is version one of Starlink, which was all of those V1 and V1.5 satellites. That had 5 shells. However, if I remember correctly, they only really filled 3 or 4 of them. I think 3 of them. They never put that many Starlink satellites into the truly polar orbits like they are planning to eventually, just because um, I think it's harder to get the financial. Um, it's harder to have those satellites pay for those themselves since there's so few users over the poles. So there were 5 for V1, and then so far they've launched into 5-ish for V2. Right, we are now going to Starlink Group 8, 9. I think there are 8, 9, and 10 missions. It's
Correct.
become a lot to follow. Like Starlink Group 9-1 is launching from Vandenberg at some point next week. So we don't really know, but a lot more.
Yeah, uh, that is a good point. The fact that they keep replenishing them, and we're not even completely sure that the 10th shell isn't kind of just adding to the first shell as the newer replacement satellites for the ones that have already deorbited as planned as part of their lifespan. So it's a lot of question marks there, but we know this is the second flight that has the 10 in front of it at least. The numbering as of now is in order.
Oh, I'm sure that'll change very quickly.
Of course it will. And I gotta ask Julia from Nick Nut Nerd, will there be a jellyfish and or will it be visible from North Carolina? What are our jellyfish chances tonight?
Well, um, we were just having that debate before we went live, and um, hmm, it's probably a little bit too early, meaning like 20 minutes too early, to have a proper jellyfish here at Cape. The sun is still setting, although going behind the clouds at the moment. And will you be able to see it in North Carolina? Most likely, yes, actually, you will. And you may have a better chance of a jellyfish like effect from the second stage than we do here.
That is very true. As it goes northeast away from us, the Carolinas are probably around some of the best shots for that based off of where the downrange assets are. Pink Bunny, I do want to say, gifted a Red Team membership during our weather hold, so thank you very much for doing that. I'd rather be flying an X-Wing, saying, Trevor, great seeing you on the Everyday Astronaut stream. Gave me a Ghostbusters moment for sure, and asking me, Sawyer, please translate. It's a lost cause trying to translate.
I was
But
gonna say I don't get the reference.
it's a kind
But
reference, don't worry.
thank you for the kind words.
John Malkin with a $50 super chat. Thank you for the super generosity. Also comes with a question. And Trevor, I'll pose this one to you. Is there a crew launch scheduled from Slick 40? And if not, why?
There is. Actually, under a month from now, we will have the Polaris Dawn mission lifting off from Slick 40s. That is going to be the first crew mission from that pad, and will just be an extraordinarily exciting mission in general. Um, so, yeah, it's soon.
Yes. Very soon and very, very exciting. I am really looking forward to that mission. I mean, Inspiration 4 was spectacular. And now we've got the first commercial spacewalk coming up. I mean, it's an exciting time to be into spaceflight this year. We
It really
finally got
is.
Starliner off the ground. We've got Polaris Dawn coming up. We had a pretty darn successful Flight 4 with no anomaly review required. So, yeah. And John Malkin, by the way, thank you for being so generous. Also gifting 5 Red Team memberships. El Mary, thank you for the super chat. No message, but still greatly appreciated. And then we got Bastion getting 6 different items from shop.nasaspaceflight.com here. We will go through all of them. But I will pose a question to you again, Trevor, of that he posed with it, saying, will this new shell of Starlink satellites, is it possible to see a few Starlink trains, maybe from the Netherlands?
Yes, I believe for all of these Starlink missions, regardless of the shell, you should be able to see it from the Netherlands. The lowest inclination they're putting satellites into at this point is 43 degrees, and I believe the Netherlands as well under that. But as long as you're under 43 degrees for some missions and 53 degrees for this one, you will be plenty good.
Yeah, what's crazy is all these launches I've seen and being nearby in Florida, I have not seen a Starlink train since the first one I think that ever launched. I saw that train, and
Oh,
that was about
really?
it. I don't know what I'm doing with myself, but also thank you for getting all of the amazing metal prints there. I mean, you got all the ones from the different Starship flights. I saw a Delta Heavy. Haven't gotten to mention this yet, but saw a space shuttle there, so that made me happy. And then here's one from Plutonium 239. Julia, I will pose this one to you. They're asking, when will they stop putting Starlink satellites in orbit?
Well, I don't know that answer, to be honest, because we don't even know how many shells there are. But the answer is not anytime soon, because I believe we're still planning on launching some of these on Starship, and Starship isn't quite to that point yet. So it'll be a while. So I hope you really like watching our stream, because we'll be having a lot of Starlink streams.
Yeah, these aren't going away anytime soon at this rate, that's for sure. And keep in mind, as I was mentioning, they have ones that are deorbiting as planned. They will burn up. You don't get the space debris. You know, it's safe, it's planned, but you got to replace those. And they're replacing them with the newer high-tech ones as well that we're seeing with the V2 minis. And so they need to refill all of the shells. And as you pointed out, we don't know how many shells. So this will be exciting to keep following.
Right, SpaceX has applied for permits, I think, for up to 42,000 Starlink satellites or something like that. And some of those satellites are going to be in a very low orbit to reduce latency. I believe some of them will be like roughly 260, 270 kilometers circular or something just really low like that, if I remember correctly. So, uh, those satellites, their lifespan will be quite short, so they'll constantly be having to replace that really low shell of Starlink satellites. But I don't think that's a thing that we're going to see SpaceX doing until Starship is up. They filled all of the higher shells. Then they'll prioritize that really low shell.
Yeah, honestly, that makes a lot of sense, I think. So, regardless, though, that means we got a lot more of these to go. uh, Here's what I'll throw to you, Trevor. Kurt Galacher, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Why have they been launching 22 now instead of 23? And if I had to guess, I have a feeling trajectory and mass have something to do with it.
Yes. So we don't have a super great answer for this, unfortunately, because they've also been putting them into a slightly lower than normal orbit. Um, but my guess, hold on, I have to look at the inclination of the previous shells real quick, because I can never remember which ones are 43 and which ones are 44. I believe they've been filling up a lot of the 43-degree shells as well. So those you can take more advantage of the Earth's um, spin. So therefore, you can generally get an extra satellite out of that. So that would be my guess of why they're doing that.
Yeah, and again, as you mentioned, this is going almost to a similar inclination to the International Space Station, off by a couple of degrees here for these. Uh, Doing so and going northeast like that, sure, you still have the easterly spin of the Earth, but Yeah, it takes a little bit more effort, and these are the larger satellites too. So, I mean, we say larger even though they're called V2 minis. Minis are still pretty darn big satellite-wise. So, as a result, to be able to then have all the downrange assets and land and reuse, it tends to err on the safer side. It is possible, though, that we could see, as we've seen in the past, slight improvements to performance on Falcon 9 that lead to them being able to launch 23 again, which leads into another question for you, Trevor, from Jake 2488. Not my Jake, but he is sleeping in the bed near me. They want to know, how do the engines work on Falcon?
It's a great question. Real quick, I just want to go back to that last question. The Group 6 missions where they've launched 23 and up to 24 satellites, that was indeed a 43-degree orbit. So that explains the difference between why they are launching one fewer satellite, just because um, they have to because of the Earth spin. But then how the Merlin engine works is a very interesting question. So the Merlin engine is a so-called open cycle engine. So what this means is, right, fundamentally what a rocket engine is you're just trying to convert mass into a very high velocity stream of gas that is all parallel to one another. So the way that this works is generally you have what's called a combustion chamber, where you burn your propellant with your oxidizer. So on Falcon 9, it's RP1 and liquid oxygen, respectively, to get very high pressure in the so called combustion chamber. And then you flow it through the special kind of nozzle so that you get the exhaust to be almost supersonic. And then which kind of helps increase some pressure. And then as the nozzle expands back out, you begin converting even more pressure into velocity. So all of that is done through this open cycle process. And what the open cycle part means is, in order to increase the pressure in that main combustion chamber, you flow the propellants to it through a turbine. And that turbine is powered by this gas generator. And that gas generator is basically a small rocket engine. And then the gas from that gets dumped overboard, and that helps increase the pressure in the main combustion chamber. So that's kind of a lot to go over without being able to show graphics on screen, but hopefully that's a good general overview of how Merlin works. And I think Sawyer may be talking while muted.
I am indeed. I mean, you were the perfect person to put that question to. I promise you didn't put me to sleep. It's just genuinely very fascinating. And you're the perfect person to explain it, which is why I threw that to you. So thank you for taking that question.
Of course.
Let's see here. We've got Canon Copeland asking, and Julia, I'll throw this one to you because it talks about the weather. Actually, I'm going to hold off on asking you that question. I promise. I will ask that momentarily. But we do have, I believe, an update now from SpaceX. And that may include the clock in the top left changing. This time, there it is. We now have the official word that they are now targeting the end of the window, the last possible opportunity for today, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And as it says there, if needed, additional opportunities are available on Friday, June 14th, so tomorrow, starting at 4:35 p.m. Eastern Time. Well, we'll see what happens. We will reset the clock there, and a reminder, they typically give the go, no go for fueling at T minus 38 minutes, with fueling beginning at T minus 35.
Looks like they're stuck with us just a little bit longer, although I don't know why. Looking that direction, it looks kind of nice, but that's okay. The rocket goes when the rocket is ready.
That is true. And as we speak, taking a look at the weather board from KSC Weather Channel, it continues to remain all green. All that means is no lightning watches, no lightning warnings, and no excessive wind gusts. That doesn't take into account upper level winds, that doesn't take into account recovery weather, things like that. So, yeah. You can see there, again, that is the timeline, and we should be 12 minutes-ish away to find out whether the launch director will verify go for propellant load or whether they will scrub. Another possibility that we have seen in the past is that even though the weather is iffy, they will still proceed with fueling, loading everything up, running through the whole countdown, take it down to when the auto sequencer would start, essentially when Falcon 9 enters startup. And if that's the case at that point, it would be held for weather if it doesn't improve by then. If they think there's a chance it might improve till that last minute, they will push it. How is the weather at the moment, Julia? Is it still kind of clear, getting cloudy? What you got over there?
Well, looking Max's direction, it looks, well, I mean, partly cloudy. But in all honesty, maybe the possible concern is some thicker looking clouds. If anybody is familiar with mammatus clouds, I actually have a few of those in front of me, which means our air is quite humid and the clouds there are quite heavy with moisture. And that's possibly heading toward Max's way, which is partly why I was a little confused as to why we'd want to delay longer because that could give that cloud a little more time to get to Max. But otherwise, it's not gusty. And with the sun going down, it's starting to cool off a little bit.
That's what kind of makes me wonder if it's some other condition that is slightly in the red or that they need to keep an eye on. And Max does say that cloud cover is worsening over Max and D at the press site where they are providing you this view from.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But hey, I'm enjoying the view of mammatus clouds forming in front of me. I mean, that is kind of pretty. Not rocket happy, but pretty all the same.
Here's an interesting question for you, Julia, though, while we're talking about the weather. As I was mentioning, just as we were getting confirmation on the delay, Kanan Copeland asked, if it happens to be a hurricane for some reason, can they put less satellites on board to give more thrust and power through and punch through the harder conditions?
Ooh, n- that is an interesting solution to the problem, but unfortunately, said problem means that launch support would not be available for a launch because we have HERCON um, levels, just like we have lightning phase warnings. We have HERCON out at Patrick Space Force Base and Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, which mean operations start to close down so that the base and Space Force Station can get ready all of the things in hurricane preparation, which means companies like SpaceX can't be launching because we're supposed to be clearing our pad of all of the toys and things that could damage your operations so that we can get back, hopefully, to normal operations faster.
Exactly. And not only does it give them time to then secure all of the equipment, all the rockets, anything that has potential explosives in it, uh, it also allows the people then, once they're done, to go home and get their houses safe, ready, and protected without having to worry about continuing all that final work. Plus, the issue that we've seen, and we saw it earlier when we were looking at the launch forecast from the 45th Space Wing, is clouds. Clouds themselves are an issue. It's not so much the rain. Depending on the type of cloud, like certain cumulus clouds and anvil clouds, especially, hence you could see there the anvil cloud rule. Thank you, Carson. One of the potentials is something that I'm sure you'll know this one, Trevor. Ares 1X had to deal with quite a few times. It dealt with scrubs because of the tribo electrification rule. I'm
And
sorry,
Sure it didn't
Crispy.
scrub just because it was silly.
Well, and another thing to consider is that the downrange weather would also probably be deteriorating, and the last thing we want to do is send support teams out for a landing that will then have to seek shelter on a coast in a hurry. So that's another reason we wouldn't really want to be launching unless you really, really, really wanted to try and squeeze something in that goes RTLS. But even then, that's still not ideal because you'd have hardware out at the landing zone.
That too. And with high seas could be a potential. But yeah, tribo electrification, in case you're unaware, basically the rocket flies through a cloud that would typically be, say, a thunderstorm cloud, like an anvil cloud, and creates its own lightning. Now, we know Apollo 12 got struck by lightning on its way up, but Ares 1X was shaped in such a way that it could literally create lightning pushing through the clouds at the speed it was and shock itself, essentially. Part of why it was
So
a dumb rocket. But
Well, so what you're saying is it was basically like launching a lightning rod into the clouds,
oh yeah, absolutely.
if you needed a visual.
That's a great visual, actually. Thank you.
You're
So
welcome.
yeah, that's another reason why they don't just punch it through the clouds and in the rain. Soyuz, I mean, just ask Russia; they'll launch in whatever it seems like. Victor Robidas, thank you very much for the support. Along with the Roundabout Guy, thank you for becoming a PadRat member. And Roseanne DeVosto, seen that name here before. Trevor, what happens to the ones that fall out of orbit?
Yeah, so the Starlink satellites are all designed to fully burn up on reentry. So what SpaceX does is they kind of have this process where they begin retiring satellites, where they slowly bring them down. Then I think they eventually bring them down to like a roughly 250, 300, somewhere in their kilometer orbit. And they just let the satellites slowly decay. Once you're at that point, they can only be up there for a few weeks before the drag will cause them to re-enter, and then they just completely burn up. Um, and since they completely burn up on re-entry, it doesn't matter where the satellites re-enter. So they don't have to have like predefined zones or anything. They just burn up on re-entry, and that's all. So SpaceX put a lot of work in to making sure that they can be good space stewardesses with this many satellites. Since they have so many, they want to make sure that, there aren't chunks of aluminum or other metals hitting the ground whenever they have to retire a satellite.
Ignoring the American saying aluminium. Um, but yeah, it's true. And a lot of the older satellites, too, were built quite differently. They didn't have some of them didn't have the point to point with the lasers. Some of them didn't have the material on the bottom that lessened their brightness in the sky. So those are the ones that they're kind of okay with at this point of letting them fall out, burn up harmlessly. It's not like the battery that fell into someone's house from outside the ISS. So these are a little smaller and a little safer to deorbit. And while I got you, Trevor, Ninja Guy Dan is asking, what's the orbital inclination and altitude of this cluster?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I don't think we know what the final orbit of these is yet, since we haven't had any Group 10 missions go there. However, the initial orbit is like 260 by 270 at 53.06 degrees, if I remember correctly.
Do the decimal points. I love it. Down to the hundredth. I think it's hundredth. Again, I went to school for journalism, not math. Let's see here. Pelajo Prince, again, I really hope I said that right, saying, "Hey guys, just turned 18 and wanted to give something back. Guess what book I get? I got. All I can say is we hopefully have it in about 43 minutes. Huh, I wonder if it was someone that we spoke to uh, during our IFT, not anymore, Starship Flight 4 broadcast by a certain Eric Berger. If so, enjoy the book, and thank you very much for the support. It is absolutely appreciated, and congrats on turning 18.
Yeah, happy birthday.
Julia, with the slightly updated launch time here. Hamster Spacer 3000 saying, first off, how much of the launch will be visible from Orlando? And now that the time has changed, jellyfish maybe?
Well, with said clouds rolling in, jellyfish from Cape, I don't think we're going to be able to catch that with our cameras, guys, even if it did happen. I'm sorry. Yes, but a little bit slightly more likely. As far as Orlando goes, if you have clearer skies than us, then yes, absolutely look to the east northeast, and you may be able to see said rocket going to space. Just get yourself up on a little higher elevation, like a parking structure, and you're good to go.
There you go. I think maybe there might be a stronger potential for the people that are up the coast along the northeast there. You might have a better shot at it. So, we'll see. I have to take this question from Keith. And I've already pre-asked it in the back channel. Keith T, how long did it take for Dee and Jack to clean up their kitchen after the cooking stream? And more importantly, did all the cameras survive? Per Dee, the quote, I think it is still a work in progress. I went to bed after 1 a.m. after washing the counter a ton. Dishes were not done. Jack said he would do those. The bacon smell is apparently, quote unquote, mostly gone. For those who don't know, there was a member stream the other night where it was literally just Jack and Dee cooking bacon near Starbase. So, one of the member perks, ladies and gentlemen, is that you can enjoy watching our Jack and Dee's epic road trip where they drove all the way out to New Mexico and then back, and they live streamed it all. And yeah, and then the bacon stream the other night. So, the silly but fun perks that you get of being a member, in addition to getting to see certain videos even before they're released publicly, such as the new Virgin Galactic video that just came out where Jack and Das got to go inside the Virgin Galactic simulator and go through an entire flight. And it is one of my favorite videos I think we've ever put out. So I highly recommend checking that out as we continue to hope that we get the launch tonight. At this point, we are coming up on the T-minus 38-minute mark, and that should be the indication of the launch director verifying go, no-go for fueling. And as of right now, it seems like the clock continues to tick down.
Yep. We just got confirmation from SpaceX themselves that all systems are good and weather is 40% favorable. So propellant load is about to begin.
There's the tweet. That's what we want to see. And 40%, I can tell you, I have seen many launches launch at 40% go an hour before launch. So don't worry. Don't don't stress out. There's a chance. There's a very strong chance, I might say, at that. STS 135 was 40% chance of liftoff on time. So just a little thing to keep in mind. And again, that means that with fueling set to go, the fueling should begin at T-minus 35 minutes. So in about 2 minutes from now, we should hopefully see the rocket starting to get frosty, especially as they begin loading the RP-1, or Rocket Propellant 1, refined form of kerosene, as well as the liquid oxygen, the LOX there, into the first stage. Meanwhile, at that same time, Stage 2 will begin loading just the RP-1. That will continue until T-minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds when we get to the best vent, which is just the LOX chill down of the line. You'll see it kind of get frosty and smoky and purge, and that will be followed 4 minutes later by the beginning of Stage 2, liquid oxygen load, with all the fuel wrapping up within the last 3 to minute and a half before launch. So keep an eye on the booster as it gets ready to get frosty. All right. Um, let's see here. We got a bunch more questions. Remind to tag us at NASASpaceflight, and we will do our best to answer as many of them as we can. Here's one that I think we need to just address and clear it out of the way. Evan saying, what was the ISS emergency? Turns out the emergency was a training drill that accidentally, the audio feed of it got pumped into the public feeds that we're able to listen to from Mission Control. So the good news is there was zero emergency whatsoever. It just happened to be someone rerouting the test Mission Control audio through the actual Mission Control audio, which caused the confusion. Everything's fine. Everyone's safe. Nothing to worry about there. Thank goodness.
Right.
We
And
did
there
good.
is an irony, though, because there was a spacewalk that was postponed, canceled for today because, well, the spacesuits were not basically uncomfortable and they needed to look into that. So it's just some odd timing, but really, they're okay up there, y'all. They're okay.
Yep, exactly.
Jared
They're fine.
Isaacman did make an interesting comment later that they're doing, SpaceX was doing a test next week with the Polaris crew, because as we mentioned earlier, Polaris Dawn is currently scheduled to launch on July 12th, um, where they were going to, be testing these extreme situations. And Jared was saying that this was what was going to happen to him in this test, it sounds like. So uh, it's kind of cool in some ways that we were able to kind of get a little bit of insight into the extreme cases that they go to for these tests, but also, yeah, that was definitely a little scary yesterday when we thought it was real for an hour or two.
Yep, and I'm glad they clarified it relatively quickly at least.
Yeah.
But it is also kind of fun to knowing now that it was not a dangerous situation. It was kind of interesting to hear how they handle these and the different options that they have. The fact that they can land and find a hospital nearby in Spain around when they would deorbit, what they do to keep the astronauts comfortable during that. The random scenarios that the SimSups, the simulation supervisors, throw in, such as one of the key people is stuck in traffic. It's those little things. But as someone who is very good friends with someone that ran a bunch of the space shuttle pre-launch simulations where they would test mission control and the crew of, hey, here's a random alarm, here's another, here's 6 of them, good luck. uh, that's what they sound like, and it's kind of cool to see how they deal with it. At this point, we will hopefully now start seeing that frost forming on the rocket, as we are now 32 and a half minutes away from the scheduled T0. Again, now 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time, which is the end of today's window. Let's see. Sonia, thank you for becoming a Red Team member. And Roseanne DeVasto saying, what level gives access to feeds like Jack and Dee's trip? I mean, we had it in the Discord as well. That's for Capcom and above. It was also streamed on YouTube. The one difference is that we chose not to have the video on demand option open. So that was kind of a just, if you happen to stumble across it and come in, then you kind of hang out for a little bit, chat, and that way we could talk more about stuff. So it was all member levels. Pad Rat and above. You got any kind of membership, you happen to come across the stream live, you could join instantly and chat along. And yeah, and a thank you to all the people that gave crazy donations to help them with their trip, the gas mileage, and hopefully new actual cast iron pans so they don't burn down the bunkhouse, which they did not, but the smoke alarm did go off. Let's see here. We have a question again from Jake that says, why does Starship use heat tiles. And I think a good addition to this, Trevor, is why do they use heat shield tiles on that, and why does Falcon not have heat shield tiles?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So, the important thing to remember is that, roughly speaking, this is a good like first order approximation. The peak heating during reentry is proportional to the cube of velocity. So the ship, the second stage is traveling what, give or take 4 to 5 times quicker than the first stage. So that means their peak heating is going to be 5 cubed or 125 times greater on ship than booster. And right, this is just some, mental give or take math. So the exact number could differ from that quite a bit. But the point is, there's way, way, way more heat that the ship has to deal with than the booster has to deal with. Um, so on Falcon, they can get away with, and Super Heavy for that matter, they can get away with just a little bit of heat shielding on the engine section, and that actually is helpful for both ascent and descent. On ascent, you can have some of hot gases kind of get trapped in between the engines, so the heat shield is useful, and then descent, obviously, the reentry bit as well. But for that reason, they need those heat shield tiles on Starship, but not on Falcon. And right, the other reason is Falcon's second stage is expended, whereas Starship's second stage is going to be fully reusable and recoverable. So Falcon 9 just burns up on its way down when Starship comes down. Well, right now, not quite in one piece, but almost entirely in one piece.
Yeah, well, we're getting there, and I don't know. I had to give it to him. I was flapping my hands to see that flap hang on. Yeah, it's first pun of the stream, and it was terrible. I'm sorry.
Okay, but Sawyer, can I give a shout out here to Starlink for being able to
Sure.
give us the views of Flappy Flap and these magnificent views of reentry, and just how much data that gives to the teams. And the great views for us are a bonus, to be honest.
I mean, yeah. So all the people say, "Oh, why do they keep launching these Starlinks? This is enough already." There's your answer. You want to see those spectacular Starship views? Well, you can thank Starlink. And in fact, they even on the some of their replays have put broadcast via Starlink, which is really cool.
Well, and even when it comes down to Falcon 9, a shortfall of gravitas now brings us audio, so we can hear boosters coming back to land, and that's pretty cool. And also very cool for people out at sea to be able to have Starlink as an asset for safety.
Oh, absolutely. I believe someone in our Discord posted a picture of a drone unit from a police unit over in the UK that had a Starlink dish on top. I mean, it's impressive the different ways that people are finding to use the Starlink network. It's kind of cool. Also, want to thank Koa Lewis here really quick for becoming a Capcom member. And there you go, Capcom and above gets access to the NSF Discord. You can see the frost there, as I was first told by Max. I have to give him the credit. He was very proud to be first. So take that, YouTube commenters. And then let's take some more questions here. Aaron BJR, Julie, can you kind of just give us a reminder here? Is this launch northern, southern? What's the trajectory here?
It is a northeasterly launch. It had been 2 years since we'd seen one of those up until the first launch of the 10 Shell 10, shall we say. And I had forgotten how wonderful these northeasterly launches are for views from Titusville, as well as the VAB squeal seems to last just a little bit longer as that booster is going northeast.
There you go. Yeah, as much as we've gotten so used to the southeasterly launches, we are 3 in a row now heading northeasterly. Here's a good question from Ben B, and I'm going to put this one to you, Trevor. They're asking, what are the advantages of load and go, where, as we mentioned here, they start fueling at T minus 35 minutes, and then within 90 seconds of everything being topped off, they hit the go launch button.
Yeah, so the load and go term is not really a term that's used for payloads. It was more for the early commercial crew program because what it talks about is loading the spacecraft with the people while their vehicle is not filled or fueled at all. So the vehicle is just in its, ground state, if you will. And then they clear the entire pad area before uh, taking back that launch arm, enabling the launch abort system, and then beginning fueling. And this is quite different from how ULA and the Russians and basically every crewed rocket in history has done it, where they begin loading the vehicle way ahead of time, and then they put the vehicle in a safe space, a safe state, if you will. Um, and then they have all of the crews access this vehicle, which again has the liquid oxygen on it, has whatever the propellant is on it, on Atlas RP1, and hydrogen, etc. Um, and then they do all of the ingress activities, load the vehicle, and then get clear the pad area ahead of launch. And the real advantage of load and go, in my opinion, is that you're approaching all of the work that's being done on the vehicle with ingress and when you have a large number of people at the pad to help out, it's just an empty vehicle at that point, right? It's no more dangerous than walking up to Starship at Starbase when it's just standing there in a full stack configuration. And then it's not until you don't actually start loading the explosive bits, the RP1 and liquid oxygen onto the vehicle until your abort system is already armed. So that's like the main advantage is that you kind of are protecting by moving all of the propellant loading until later. You're allowing it to only happen in times where you're in this nice, safe, pressurized vehicle that can abort if something is to go wrong.
Yeah, and again, we've seen that traditional methods still work. There are pros and cons to each of them. Starliner, we have seen one of the cons in the fact that we had the issue that one time where the fuel was already in its set state, and any changes would have meant scrubbing the launch, which they did. But at the same time, it also then remained mostly fueled for future attempts. Let's see here. Here's a question uh, from Sonia saying, when will SpaceX position the drone ship in between the Bahamas? Trevor, any idea if that's coming soon?
Um, I'm not sure what mission that'll be coming with. I think all of the missions in the foreseeable future are going northeast. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure. Sorry about that.
It's fine. None of us are completely sure on that yet. It's been discussed. They have all the verification and stuff, but they haven't actually given the go-ahead for that yet for a particular mission. And as you pointed out, with everything going northeasterly at the moment, it's a lot less likely to happen that way. Uh, here's one from what's the name here? There we go. Another one from Jake. Julie, I'll put this one to you. Do you know why they send 22 satellites into low Earth orbit?
Um, well, I don't know the exact reason why outside of that is what fits in the fairing and most efficiently can be pushed to space by Falcon. Um, that's the best I have for you technically, and 22 is a nice round number. But I have a feeling that has absolutely nothing to do with it.
I thought it was because of the Taylor Swift song.
Oh,
Uh,
well, that could be too. So, are we going to have a hat also on the fairing Maybe that's what caps off the end of the payload dispenser.
That would be amazing.
And
Uh,
side note, every time I see a TikTok during that song, I want to cry because they're so sweet. So that's my little
They
Taylor
are.
side note.
I can't believe I failed as a host. I have let Trevor talk about Taylor Swift. I'm sorry, folks. What I'm not sorry about, though, is that we are coming up on not just any event, but the best event. And yes, you can argue all you like in chat. Is it actually an event? Is it just a line purge? I get it. But take a look at this and tell me it's not really, really cool. There it goes. You messed up my timing, SpaceX. Come on. Uh, Trevor,
As a
as we see.
Floridian, I was just going to say, as a Floridian, that looks like a wonderful way to cool down, to be honest.
Oh, it does. Also interesting, just to give you an idea of the humidity, in that it's not super windy, just the fact that it's hanging there. It's not spreading out to one particular side, kind of just hanging around even through the tower, which, Trevor, I know that's kind of normal, so can you explain what's going on?
Yeah, of course. So this vent is just preparing those lines for stage two liquid oxygen load. Sawyer mentioned a few minutes ago, stage one liquid oxygen load begins at T minus 35 minutes, along with stage two RP1 load. But they want to load the liquid oxygen as late as possible onto stage two. Since it's way smaller of a tank on stage two than stage one, they can start loading that liquid oxygen later, and that helps ensure that it's as cool as possible for launch. So, because of that, they don't start loading locks on stage two until T minus 16 minutes. So what this line is doing is it's just preparing those lines for that load. So it's making sure they're clean and cool for that load, which will begin in about 2.5 minutes.
There we go. And again, yeah, we should see this last about another minute and a half, and then once that dies down, as you saw on the countdown on the screen, we will proceed into the next portion of fueling the second stage. Trevor, you really want that 22 hat, don't you?
I didn't bring it up this time, but yes, I do.
Oh boy. Here's one from Jermine1269. Julia, do you know if we're still on track currently for Falcon Heavy with Goes You in a couple weeks?
I do believe Goes You has been delivered via an Antonov, if I remember correctly.
Mhm.
And I have heard of no delays. So, yeah, absolutely. And it's been a while since we've seen a heavy. So, can you tell I'm a little bit excited?
No, not at all.
Not at all. I mean, twice the landings.
You are not
only
alone. I am
it only
also
has
so. Go ahead, Trevor.
only 27 engines though. Like that feels like nothing now.
You know what? Starship will be here soon enough. Okay.
I mean, you'll have, what, 5 more than the previous flight? So, I say that because, again, we had the one engine that didn't ignite or kind of burnt out right after liftoff. But still, I mean, yeah, 32 engines is impressive. 27, not too shabby either, I must point out.
I'm just saying, to light 27 engines at the right time is there's some talent in that.
Yeah, a lot. And we've seen them improve it over time, even compared to that first flight where somehow on the first demo flight they actually all lifted. But yeah,
It's especially insane to think about. Like Falcon Heavy is hard to ignite with 27 engines, but then each one of those engines on Falcon Heavy is like a toy compared to the Raptor. So it's just like Starship is just insane, and the fact that they've now been able to light 33 three times, and then what they had one shut down a little right after it ignited on the last flight. It's just crazy.
What's crazy is seeing the development of the ground systems so that said engines that ignite do not get destroyed by the pad kind of self-destructing.
Well, yeah, that. I mean, we've seen it still get a little roasty toasty sometimes after these flights, but yeah, not anything like we've seen with Starship in the past. Let's see here. By the way, the 20-minute vent in chat saying, I'm venting, by the way, hi. So, hi. Here's one for you, Trevor. Talking about Starship, we saw, I mean, the full jettison of the hot stage ring, all of that. You could see even the pushing mechanisms and everything there. What about Falcon 9? How does Falcon 9 use stage separation?
Yeah, that's a great question. So on Falcon 9, there are four pusher mechanisms mounted on the inner stage. So there are three that are radially around the booster on the outside, kind of, and you can kind of see some bumps along the connection where those attach to one another. And then there's one central pusher, which is where I'm sure you've seen the video of stage separation from inside the second stage, where there's kind of that rod that is in the middle of the Merlin vacuum engine's nozzle. So those four pushers push the two stages apart. Well, first, there are some latches between the stages that they unlatch those latches, and then they push them apart with those four pushers, and then they retract those four pushers as the second stage begins its ignition process, and as stage one begins preparing for its reentry, whether that's um, ASDS, in which case they just start deploying the grid fins and start that flip, or start flipping for the boost back burn if it's RTLS.
There we go. I do want to thank some people here really quick. Apocalypse Cow, thank you for gifting 5 Red Team memberships. A name that we see often, a bunch of these, including Coco Cats, thank you for gifting a Red Team membership. And of course, Bideford, you gotta love him, gifting 5 Red Team memberships. Thank you very, very much. As we are now under 14 minutes away from the scheduled liftoff of the Starlink 10-2 mission. Let's see here. Hamster Space Tour 3000 is kind of asking about launch backup opportunities. Julia, if it's scrubbed today, they have tomorrow, right? And would they potentially have Saturday if needed?
Well, I know for sure they have tomorrow. Oh, I think you lost me.
Just
Jeez.
switch to a different microphone, it sounds like.
All right. Well, hello there, phone. We definitely do have tomorrow. I would have to look at the weather forecast to see if Saturday is an opportunity, but as far as I know, there's nothing else launching, and Saturday's weather is probably no worse than Friday's weather, so that is more than likely an opportunity as well.
Again, we hope, though, that we will actually see it take off in about 12 and a half minutes from now. Trevor, question for you from Eric here. Do we know what is the 10 dash Starlinks serving? Different orbit, new service with direct to cell?
Yeah, that's a good question. So these Starlink missions in Group 10 so far have not had any direct-to-cell capability. All of the direct-to-cell missions, I believe so far have just been Group 8, and we've seen up to 13 of those launched at a time. We are expecting some direct-to-cell missions to launch from the Cape. However, my understanding is that will not be on these Group 10 missions, and that will be on the Group 8 missions. Um, it could also be Group 9. I don't know. It's the current Starlink naming scheme is very confusing. But so far, no direct to cell satellites in Group 10, and they're going to a little bit higher inclination orbit to 53 degrees as opposed to 43 degrees of Group 6.
Can you talk a little bit about the direct to cell satellites? Like, we have the Starlink V2s, and yet we differentiate between those with the direct to cell. What's the difference?
Yeah, so the direct to cell satellites are going to enable SpaceX's well, direct-to-cell constellation, what that will be is any current phone, I assume, 5G capable phone, but I don't know that for sure, will be able to directly communicate with these satellites to get cell phone service. So what SpaceX is doing is they're enabling cell phone service anywhere on the Earth's surface through these direct-to-cell Starlink satellites. And it is worth noting that these direct-to-cell constellation will be limited at the start to probably only text messages, since those do not require that much data. And then longer term, they'll be able to start expanding to allow phone calls, to allow, um, data services and whatnot. But this will not be, a replacement for cell towers because the bandwidth is just far too low. Right, you need to go to fairly inefficient modulation schemes, I would imagine, to make this work. And more than that, you have to, launch the satellites to begin with. So it's by no means a replacement for cell towers. However, it will be a nice addition to them, so that we're able to text anyone from anywhere on Earth's surface where that constellation covers. And John Edwards, I believe, has noted that they're expecting the direct to cell constellation to be operational by the end of this year. So it's exciting times.
I do want to make a point here that it is worth noting. Uh, as of right now, it appears that the second stage is not fully frosty at this point when we would expect it to be. You can see a lot more of the sort of black interstage and the upper portion there. You don't see the frost rolling off it like you do the first stage of the rocket. So I just want to point that out here. It doesn't officially mean that it's
We
scrubbed.
do have official confirmation now.
We do have the official confirmation as of 35 seconds ago. SpaceX releasing a tweet saying we are standing down from tonight's Falcon 9 launch attempt due to weather, now targeting Friday, June 14th, as you can see there on the official SpaceX website, targeted for 4:35 p.m. Eastern Time with opportunities until 8:19 p.m. Eastern. So hey, join us for a launch and a flame trench tomorrow, right? They're right around the same time. And
Wow, look
as
at that sky though. That is gorgeous.
I mean, 39A dead center there, looking absolutely spectacular. You can see the currently turned off countdown clock in the bottom right, and that sky is stunning. Unfortunately, the weather, though, not fully cooperating for tonight's attempt.
The oh so very sweaty me is just kind of dreading that time of day for a launch, but hey, you know what? At least we can enjoy the sunset tonight.
We do what we gotta do. Well, hopefully, Julia, will we see you? Hopefully, we'll see you back out here for tomorrow's launch attempt. But regardless, thank you so much for your commentary tonight.
You're so welcome, and yes, you will be stuck with me tomorrow.
Yay! I mean, I'm sorry, I was supposed to say, "Aw, man." No, you're awesome, Julia. Thank you. Trevor, thank you for your awesome and insightful commentary as well. I know I can trust you to help break down how the Falcon works, and you nail it.
I'll try my best, that's for sure. But I don't know if I'll be on tomorrow since it'll be the flame trench, but let's hope we see this rocket go tomorrow.
We will see. And Max and Dee, who are camera operators out in the field, they have been absolutely spectacular. Shout out to them for braving through all of this. Make sure you go check out their socials because they have other fantastic photography. And of course, a thank you to Carson behind the scenes, pushing the buttons, pulling the levers, and unfortunately bringing the scrub view just for you. Uh, I am Sawyer Rosenstein. I have been your host for this evening's launch attempt. Hopefully, we will see you for tomorrow's launch attempt. Don't forget, we also have the Flame Trench, which is our Friday kind of off the rails recap show, right around the same time. So hopefully, you join us for the launch and that. And if you're not a fan of the loosey goosey type, don't forget we also have This Week in Spaceflight twists coming out tomorrow as well. So keep an eye out for all of that for a busy Friday. I've been your host, Sawyer Rosenstein. Hopefully, we will see you all again tomorrow.
And here we go. We have liftoff.
Propulsion continues to be normal.
R68 chamber pressure looks good.
Following up. Roger, Atlantic.
Water towers fly! Yes! Echo down to nominal.
Flight outside FD off. Bring in FD off. Off. It's orange!
Oh my god! Oh my god!
Decollage. Put that in the big bag, you know.
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
This methane will be igniting in the flare, correct?